Hi everyone, welcome back to SwitchUp, and today Glen and I are going to go through the highest rated games for the month. We actually had some semi-decent titles, didn't we?
We did indeed, yeah. So this is of course for the month of June, and we had 11 reviews go out during that month, so we'll rank them from the worst, obviously 11th place up until the best.
Don't forget, if you're looking for eShop credit, you can get an extra 5% cash back on your eShop purchases by buying your cards over at switchup.gg.
So what were the highest rated reviews for the month of June on SwitchUp? Well, let's find out.
In last place for the month, we have Loop 8, which was a visual novel RPG hybrid that saw you in the only remaining and surviving town on the planet. You have to build up your relationships with everyone, and as the loop suggests, repeatedly go through the same experience to eventually fight back against what are known as the Kagai in this alternate universe. Now, unfortunately, the pacing of this just wasn't quite right, and it didn't do the loop mechanic nearly as well as some other visual novels like Raging Loop. It meant that it just became quite repetitive and a little bit dull, which is a shame because the premise was really nice. Still, if I were to find it on a heavy discount, it would be worth it. It scored a SwitchUp score of 66%.
Moving on to 10th place then, and we had AEW Fight Forever, which is one of our more recent reviews for the month actually, isn't it?
Yeah, we played this one together for a little bit of tag team action, and it very much does feel like an old school wrestling game. I didn't actually realise at the time when we were playing it, Glenn, that it's made by the same people that made the OG SmackDown that I was talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that came out in the year 2000.
Oh, wow.
And it feels like it's stuck in a time warp.
Right.
It's not to say it's a bad game. It's a fun arcade wrestling title, but when you're looking at premium price, which is £50 here in the UK,
wow, okay.
It does have a roster of 47 fighters, and then you can create your own, as you saw, but it doesn't have enough game modes to really justify the asking price, if you ask me.
I suppose this is one of those games where if you're a fan of said product, I suppose you're adding another 10-20% on just through that factor, aren't you, you know?
Absolutely. That one scored a SwitchUp score of 67%.
Right, we had a three-way tie for 7th place this month, with the first of those three games being Etrian Odyssey Collection. This was reviewed for us by Holden Green, one of a few reviews he's done for us, and he did a great job, and it's a collection of classic JRPGs.
Yeah, these take place from the first-person perspective, and they're almost dungeon crawlers, is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
I know he was a massive fan of the series back in the day, had played through all of them, but I don't think he felt there was enough done on these in terms of updates for a modern audience.
Right.
But if you were a classic fan, you're going to enjoy them just as much as you did back then.
I think I'm fairly sure in saying that the price was also very high, like £70 odd over here. You could buy the games individually for about £30 each, so obviously you're making a saving if you buy the trilogy. That's still a lot of money, isn't it, you know? With that said though, it got a SwitchUp score of 75%.
Next up then we had Killer Frequency, which wasn't what I expected. I think when you first told me about this, Glenn, it was from Team 17, and you're based in you're a radio host, dealing with people phoning in and trying to help them in certain ways. I was expecting a really scary horror game, but it sounds a little bit more like a slightly thrilling version of Firewatch.
Yeah, it has its roots very much set in 80s horror. Certainly the slasher genre, but with a heavy emphasis on humour, with things like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, that sort of thing from back in the day. Yeah, so as you said, you are a radio DJ, and there are people phoning in because there is a killer on the loose, and you have to try and help them survive, basically. It's actually a very clever game in terms of how that works. There were a couple of flaws, mainly down to the controls. You play in a first-person view, and where you do carry out the kind of more mundane tasks of putting on records and things like that, which I did like. I did like that interjection of normality, because the controls were quite finicky. It became as tedious as it would in real life, you know? So that's a shame, but still definitely one to experience, I would say, perhaps on a sale. It got, again, a SwitchUp score of 75%.
Then we have one that Asdin reviewed for us. It's called Novalands, and it looked very interesting. Now, an interesting point on this one is that the main reason it's down, I should say, in the 75s is the performance, or was the performance. Now, it's seen a number of updates since it came out, but it still does have issues in terms of stutter and other things, but it doesn't have those massive crashes that it once had.
Yeah, in terms of gameplay, I'm pretty sure they packaged it as almost a hybrid between things like Factorio, with that level of automation, and also I think I heard them mention Forager, which is quite an interesting mix of genres. And as you say, in terms of that pure gameplay, it worked well. It's just a shame that the launch release was marred by those technical issues. It's nice to hear that patches have sorted it out to some degree, and hopefully it will be one that they will continue to patch. But in its current state, as you said, it got 75%.
Nocturnal intrigued me from the second I saw the trailer. It really did look like a mixture of Prince of Persia and something like Dead Cells. Now I was actually quite thankful to see that it wasn't a roguelike. This is a fully curated game and it does definitely take inspiration from the likes of Prince of Persia. Predominantly you're moving from left to right. There are different platforming obstacles to overcome, but the real antagonist here is actually the darkness that's overcome the land. You use your flaming saber to light the various torches that you come across, and that's also used in the puzzling. So sometimes you'll be on moving platforms, using said saber to light torches and keep the area alight, because when you're in the darkness, if you're there for too long, you'll eventually die. There are certain enemies as well that when they're in darkness, they're invulnerable, so you'll need to keep the world ablaze. It's a very cool game, but you know what I'm going to say? It had a few performance issues. Now, it's seen 3 patches already since it came out and it is slightly better, but inherently it has an ever so slightly laggy animation style.
Right.
And you need responsiveness, I think, in this style of game. It's still very fun, but for the reasons mentioned, it did score a SwitchUp score of 77%.
On to our most recent review now, in 5th place, and this is the Lara Croft collection. Now this brings together 2 games from the past, 2 Lara Croft games. These are the top-down twin-stick shooter type games, and the gameplay is still relatively fun to this day. You'll be shooting enemies and solving minor puzzles, but it does get a bit repetitive after a while.
Yeah, I played through this one with my daughter. She absolutely loved it. But as Glen said, even in our 2 or 3 hours playing together, we noticed the same mechanics over and over, and it just became a little repetitive. If you're after an action arcadey co-op experience, then this would be great, and it is also at a very reasonable price. I think it's 20 quid for both the games and all the DLC. That one came in with a SwitchUp score of 78%.
In 4th place then, another blast from the past, we had Story of Seasons: A Wonderful Life. Now this is a remake of the game that first released on the GameCube back in, I think it was 2003, give or take, although it was called Harvest Moon back then, and it was one of the first of the Harvest Moon series to move into 3D. Now I will say that they've done a very good job of updating it. The visuals look really nice, the frame rate is very consistent, something that wasn't the case with the PlayStation 2 version of this game, which this is actually based on, and overall you'll be doing the things that you expect in a farming simulation game. The one thing that I didn't appreciate about it quite so much was that it is quite linear in respect of progression, in that, say, you have to get married by the end of the first year, otherwise you can't carry on. I like it when these games just let you live your life as you want to. That did take the score down a little bit for me, but it's still a good game. It's just there are so many good options available in this genre these days. It got a SwitchUp score of 79%. Into the top 3, and in 3rd place we had Nuclear Blaze. This was a very pleasant surprise actually, although perhaps it shouldn't have been, as it is from the team behind Dead Cells, a great game that is, and this one sees you playing as a firefighter who is in a facility trying to make his way through and uncover a few secrets about the place as you go. You'll be moving through, taking out the fires, and things will get obviously progressively harder as you go on. You'll need to find switches that turn off certain electrical components, for example, or turn on sprinklers to help you as you get through. It lasts about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and for me it was just a little too short. Now I very much enjoy shorter games these days, but it was one of those where when it finished I felt like I could have played for another hour and still enjoyed it. It didn't outstay its welcome, which on the one hand is good, but I would have appreciated just it to be a tiny bit longer. That being said, there is a challenge mode in there that does change things up quite a bit, if you like that sort of thing, but on the whole this got a SwitchUp score of 83%.
In 2nd place then for the month we have the lovely Pikmin 1 and 2. This was my first experience ever playing them. Glen very often talks about how good they are, and they are very good games. Now the first title did have an interesting mechanic whereby you had to complete it within a certain number of days, right?
You had to get a certain amount of the parts from your ship before the days expired, otherwise you couldn't finish the game, absolutely. Whereas the second game did away with that mechanic and yeah, played in a more traditional sense. With that in mind, as much as I do prefer the first game actually, I love that first game. I think if you're new to the series and want maybe something that's not gonna feel quite so daunting, the second game might be the way to go, but obviously this bundle's available for a very good price and you could try both.
Overall we gave it a combined SwitchUp score of 84%.
And in first place for the month, quite a surprise I would say, this is Bleak Sword.
Yeah, Bleak Sword DX was another one from Devolver Digital and was an improved version of an older title, I believe.
Yes, I believe it was on something like Apple Arcade, something like that to begin with.
It's very interesting because you play in these small black and white dioramas, but it actually feels like a hardcore Souls-like. You'll be dodge rolling out the way, hacking and slashing, trying to keep your stamina up, and then it's interspersed with sections where you're riding your horse and trying to evade enemies. It's a really good game actually, and it's a whole lot of fun, but I don't think that style will click with everyone.
Yeah, it looks like an acquired taste to be fair, but obviously clicked with Asdin, who I believe reviewed this one, and it got a SwitchUp score of 86%.
So that's it for the month. Let us know your favourite games. If there are any that we didn't review, pop it down in the description and we'll have a good old chinwag.
Don't forget, if you are looking for eShop credit to pick any of these up, or anything else of course for that matter, you can get your eShop credit via our website switchup.gg. Anything you spend on there, you'll get yourself 5% back in cashback via our SwitchUp tokens. That of course will accumulate over time and you can put it towards a saving on a future purchase. There's also a link down there to Play Asia if you're looking to import any games. Again, use the link, use the code stated and you'll get yourself 5% off of an order. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.